We're making the show that the showrunner wants. I'm here to collaborate, but in the end, I'm here to deliver what they want. After the Me Too movement, there was incredible just doors opening for so many women in the industry. We were getting each other really good jobs on like good level shows. The first season on Grey's Anatomy was really contentious with the network. And eventually she's like, they want to cancel this show. So I'm just going to make the show I want to make. Cut to following your instincts leads to a 20 season run.
Hey everyone, I'm Rafi Salem back with another edition of Talking MEWShop. Today we have a very special guest from California, Susan Vaill. Thank you so much for joining us. And of course, Josh Apter and Jason Banke with the Manhattan Edit Workshop. Josh, please kick it off.
Give you the elevator pitch for Manhattan Edit Workshop. So what started out as a small class in Final Cut Pro in Lower Manhattan. No, this is all, I'm making it up. We used to, I will say, we used to have a 4-week art of editing workshop that required extension because way back, the person I ran the school with said, wouldn't it be cool if students worked with editors for a couple weeks? And we started like an artist in residence program. And she was friendly with Larry Silk. You might know him. He's a documentary editor, Pumping Iron and many films. Oh, yeah. And they were friendly and he's like, I'd love to do it. And so we extended the program. And then we, at the time we were doing Final Cut and Avid and then, sort of this 2-week artist in residence program. And we've been doing it ever since. This is like 20 years later. And Susan, we had the pleasure of having you join a class. It was back in 2023, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's great because not only the students, and there's a group in there right now, hopefully they don't make too much noise while we're doing our interview, but they're in the throes of Avid this week and they're watching, I think they're doing either a comedy or documentary, but we sort of dunk ourselves in, the art history, the aesthetics, the sort of the why of editing during the whole class. And then we really amplify that in the artist in residence portion where you get to talk about how you got started and your career, how they might go up, tricks and tips for them, but the benefit of the tools in your toolbox. And that's really fun. And so having these conversations is like, I keep saying this, that's not why I do it, but boy, does it make it feel good to do it because I love talking to editors about their work.
I do too. Very much.
So, and Jason, I'm going to throw it to you. I don't know what corner of the screen I'm in. So down there's Jason.
Oh, that's where I am. Okay. I first came across contact with Susan because of our sister company, Filmmaker U. I think we were interviewing you for Hacks, and I realized you'd be a great candidate to be someone to work with the students. So I passed you on to Janet. So that's kind of how we crossed paths. So we, which led to, I think that everybody from the class loved it. But yeah, we wanted to get you on to talk about, because you have such a long history of editing and everything like that. But you were saying some interesting things. I'm
feeling it. I feel that long history right now.
I know Rafi likes to go way back, so I'll ease that along. How did you get in that direction to get to where you are? Like, what started you out? Was it something you yearned for in high school? Were you an artist and you found your way to editing? Like, how did that start?
No, I was in high school, and there was a little video class kind of starting that was an independent, like kind of the photography teacher was teaching it, and a friend of mine was making a little music video set to a Jimi Hendrix song, and it was just pure montage. It was just images and feet tapping and cool colors, and it was deck to deck, the SVHS decks, connected together. And I was fascinated. I just sat next to her and watched it. So like my first real taste of filmmaking was that. However, just rewind a tiny bit, I was a doublemint twin as well. I have a twin sister. I was born in LA, and my parents didn't even know they were going to have twins. We were a complete surprise. Like, how often does that happen? And I think they were overwhelmed, and they saw an ad in the paper that was like, babies wanted, exploit your child for filmmaking. No, help pay for college, and because they can, it's 2 for 1. You can have more child hours on set if you have two children that look exactly alike. So we started out on Love American Style and some other weird little 70s TV shows and movies. And Sunshine actually was one that was like a John Denver, all sad 70s stories. And then that just sort of merged into commercials. And so we did a couple of commercials, and one of them was Doublemint, which was not seen very often. It was not the famous one with the girls on the bikes, but anyway, but that did give me a little taste of the industry, and I knew what I liked and I didn't like from that experience, like very clearly. And what I was fascinated by was when we would be on a backlot or on a set, and I just thought the behind the scenes was so interesting. So that, and then combined with like that first exposure to seeing editing, I wound up making my own little documentary about my dad teaching me to rock climb my senior year of high school. And that was just set to all this Tom Petty music. And so it's not lost on me that those early projects were actually all very music driven, because that's been such a through line in my career. And so it was kind of amazing when I realized that, thinking back, like, oh yeah, the first things I did was just like set to music and enjoying editing to that rhythm. And so yeah, so then I went to college on the East Coast, still not really thinking about film, but I went to Williams in Massachusetts, and they have a really strong history program. And so I was an art history major, but I also discovered all the film history and film theory classes, and I just fell in love with those. And so it was kind of interesting to be a kid from LA who really just knew about the film industry as a very commercial place, and then to study all this foreign film and auteur theory and all these things. And happily, I would come back to LA, and I was able to kind of try out a couple of internships and PA jobs. And then, 2 years after college, I applied to film school and got into USC, and came back to LA for good then. So,
And you never
yeah.
look back, right?
No.
No. So wait, I got to ask,
Yeah.
because well, I still climb indoors, but I used to climb
Oh,
a lot. Um,
yeah.
would you go out to, was it Yosemite's not too far, right?
Yeah. I mean, my dad was a big climber. He loves Yosemite. But it's a little far, and I think it's pretty advanced climbing. So mostly
Mm.
local bouldering. There's a place called Stony Point out here. There's a cliff at Zuma. There's a really wonderful area south of Mammoth Lakes, which is a ski area called the Buttermilks. It's sort of a famous bouldering spot, and so that was where most of our climbing was.
No, that's nice. I know it's directly related to film editing. I had to ask, but I'll just close by saying
No.
my 14-year-old climbs on a recreational team in Brooklyn, and
Oh,
his feet outgrew, like he's growing. He's a little weed, this kid. So he's wearing like my 30-year-old rock climbing shoes that don't
amazing.
look like new shoes. Like the technology is different. So people
Yeah.
are, like they look like Mork and Mindy shoes. Remember he wore those sort of like lace ups. Everyone's like, what?
Yeah.
Dude, they invented Velcro. Anyways, off topic, but I guess the connective tissue is like the joy of cutting to music,
Hmm.
finding those rhythmic things, or like
Yeah.
those like happy accidents when like
Yeah.
you just sort of play them together and you're like, wow, this is hitting on the beat. Oh wait, that, and it just kind of keeps
Yeah.
establishing a rhythm, and it's just like, okay,
Yeah.
something's going on here. I'm just gonna back off.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. So I went to film school and kind of asked one of my first professors, like, I would think I really want to be an editor. And he, of course, was a documentary editor of Hoop Dreams. His name was Bill Hogsey. And he was like, well, you got to do documentary. And but he was right. And it was amazing. I mean, you really have to learn how to find the story. And I still really rely on that experience to this day. For temp scoring, I use a lot of documentary score because it's not as familiar as some of the feature film scores. It's not, very noticeably Hans Zimmer. So it's really authentic. And that was what I sort of learned about working in documentary, was really finding authentic moments, and then noticing that the scores in documentaries tend to be very beautiful and nimble kind of. And they don't, and not too pushy. So I love using documentary scores today. And then that was a very fortuitous time, though, because it was like around the late 90s or 2000. And I think that's when Survivor came out. And Survivor was the first reality TV show, and kind of big reality TV show. And so they were like, all the networks were like, we need to make more reality programming, which is just like documentary. So all of a sudden, all of us kind of, nerdy documentary kids at USC, which is very famous for its narrative stuff, you know, and we were sort of, kind of like, well, we're just over here doing documentaries. They're really good. All of a sudden, we all got jobs like right out of the bat. And like the indie film industry had kind of cratered. And so suddenly, everyone who was in documentary had a very successful like on ramp to a career. And, and it was things like Extreme Makeover Home Edition and, and Project Runway and Top Chef have like it just trained so many editors. And those shows were also great ways to get your union days. And then you could get into the union. And so that's just exactly what I did. I worked on a couple of documentaries and bad reality shows, but they all paid off. Like eventually that one of the editors I assisted on a A&E documentary on circuses, she wound up working on The Office. And when I was, I'm fast forwarding literally like we worked together. We always remembered it was during September 11th. And then in, 2015, when I left Grey's Anatomy, and I was like, I really want to get into comedy, she helped me get my first job interview on a show that was, one of the producers from The Office. And so I love to tell that story because, early in your career, you take these jobs that you think are not going to pay off or they're not going to do anything for you. And you cannot predict when it's going to come back and help you and be an asset to your career. So and that woman is Claire Scanlon, and she's now an incredible director, and she's directing Up a Storm. And I've gotten to work with her as my director on a couple of shows. And last time I saw her was when I was at Abbott Elementary, and she was there prepping to direct. And the director I was working with had been a writer on The Office, and one of the other directors that I was just finishing working with had been the camera operator on The Office. And it was just, we had this huge reunion in my edit bay, and I was not on The Office, but I would go visit the set sometimes and see Claire. And it was delightful. It was really nice to be a part of that reunion.
So because I'm a huge comedy fan,
Yeah.
you're talking about Office Space, but I see Steve Carell and Space Force.
Yeah.
So is that what led to Space Force?
100%. Claire is the one who gave them my name. And that was very interesting. I mean, just to rewind, my first big break was as an assistant editor on the pilot of Grey's Anatomy. And I'd been doing a lot of like crappy kind of Lifetime-y, USA TV, whatever MOWs, one big Tom Cruise movie, and then the pilot of Grey's. And when I got to that, I was like, oh my God, TV is the place for me because I was an athlete in college and I love a team. I love a team environment. And I had found features to be kind of isolating. Like I actually never wanted to work in my home because I'm like, my home is my home and I want my work to be with like my work team, So I loved Grey's when we started that first season. It was, a hallway right above the main sound stage. And we had 3 editors and 3 assistants and the whole post team. And you could walk downstairs and see, the wardrobe people. And it just was it's like what you want that experience to be, which is another reason why I think remote work is not that advantageous for people, because it's part of why you want to get in the business is just to like walk around the film studio and everything. So that was really great. And those early days on Grey's, the show was very comedic. It was like, and they did a great job of establishing connection to character through comedy. So then when you really liked these characters, they started, of course, torturing them with melodrama. And so then it was even more effective, just to connect to the audience. And so then, of course, once they got their hooks in the audience, it became a super tearjerker for several years. And at that point, I was like, oh, and I was on that show for 11 years. I cut 70 episodes. And it was, I think right after Sandra Oh and Patrick Dempsey left, I was just like, this is a different show now. And they had really made it special. And and I was, really feeling that sense of, I kind of wish this show was funnier and not so tragic all the time. And I remember how it used to be. So I called up Claire, who I had reconnected with, and, said, can you help guide me like on getting into comedy? And so she really vouched for me and helped me get into some half hours. So then I would go back and forth the next few years. I was very much a Rolling Stone, and I would I would do like a comedy that got, half-hour Fox comedy that got canceled, and then I would go do, an hour-long drama, and that was my touchstone, and that's where a lot of people knew me from. But I was going back and forth, and I actually am very proud of having done that, because most people kind of get pigeonholed in like drama or comedy, and
No, it's very
especially
difficult. Yeah, it's like
comedy is very
I was
hard.
going to ask you, like moving from one, like even from nonfiction to fiction. I've
Yeah,
known editors who they have careers in reality TV and
yeah,
feature documentary, and like because they don't have something on their reel that shows they can do comedy, which is kind of preposterous on some level, they
yeah,
won't get work unless they have the work already. That you could transition from
yeah.
not from like Survivor to hour comedy drama to half-hour comedy. Is it because of the people that believed in you, you think? Or well, you tell me, like, how do you think you were able to so easily sort of roll like the stone here?
I'm glad it seems like it was easy. It's never easy. But yeah, no, I mean, it's like you kind of hit those walls, and you have to sort of think about, how can I find the hole in this wall, and how can I break through? And so back when I was assisting in documentaries, I had done one Showtime movie with a sort of mentor editor I'd met in film school. And then my healthcare, I got into the union, I got my healthcare, and then it all ran out. And I called up the union. And I have to say, I still do I love being a part of a union that does protect its members and everything. And I said, how do I don't know anyone in narrative. I only know documentary people. And I was working on a very depressing documentary about child abuse. And I was like, I just need it to be like actors, and it's not really happening to like these real people. And so they said, put your name on the available list, which is one of the benefits of the union. They have, you can just put your name out there on your resume, and then people can go to it when they're looking to hire an assistant. And so I put my resume on that, but I looked at other people's listings, and they were all people like working on shows that I loved. And I thought, why would anyone hire me because of an HBO documentary that hasn't aired yet? You know what I mean? It's like the coolest thing on my resume. And my little cat's jumping around in the back. Uh, and so I had to like sit down and sort of take stock about, what are my assets, what are my strengths. And I think coming from documentary, it's very low budget. You have to work very often all by yourself in the middle of the night, because assistants would often work at night and the editor would work during the day, because you shared an avid. And I had to learn how to solve problems. I had to move avids. I had to fix text. There was no tech support that you could call. It was just like, it's bare bones. It's documentary. And so I learned how to stay calm and solve problems. So that's what I said. I was like, girl wonder, able to solve problems in a single bound. That was, in the special skills section, where it's like Avid, Pro Tools, FCP.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I put. And so that's what got me a phone call. And I interviewed with this editor, Victor Dubois, and he's the one who eventually cut the Grey's Anatomy pilot. And he liked me when he met me, and he was amazing with music too. That's one of the biggest things I learned from him, was like doing all the needle drops and editing and mixing music and making it work effectively with picture. And so so I assisted him for a couple of years. And that Grey's just, as soon as we got to that, I was like, oh my God, this is it. This is like exactly what I want to do. And it's comedy, it's drama, it's feminist. It's like the women characters were so amazing. It was so different from, say, Sex and the City, which was the other big show for young women at that time. And I was like, I don't relate to that, but I relate to this. These like competitive, intelligent, highly educated, yet still interested in relationships and friendships, smart ladies. So I loved getting to sort of support those characters. And I still love hearing, I mean, the show's still on the air. It's amazing. Season 20 right now. And it's still inspiring a lot of women to become doctors. And I think that's incredible.
Probably one of the smartest things I've ever done for my career. It gave me all the tools that I needed to be able to jump into a new career. getting myself into a mindset, thinking like an editor, and being around people that I can talk to on that level was really invaluable to me.
A lot of the things that I learned from that class, I still think about.
I loved the classroom. I loved the computer stations. We built a sense of community.
And it also instills a lot of confidence in you to take that and go out into the world.
After I took the class, I felt very prepared to take the next step.
I owe Manhattan Workshop the career that I have right now.
Things have been going great, and I really have the Manhattan Workshop to thank for that.
The question was, how did I kind of get back into Space Force, right? So okay, I think you also asked about getting into comedy, because it can be
transitioning, because like there's a dissonance, like you have to sort of, reassure them that you can do your job, which is strange because your job as an editor is to interpret the material, whether it's comedy or drama or anything. But so how did you,
people who work in comedy, especially writers, it's almost scientific. They really have like very strong opinions about what is comedy, what makes comedy. I think like script writing in comedy is very, it's very precise.
I just had to break in with timing.
Yeah. And so
thank you, Jason. I appreciate the validation. What makes comedy?
Comedy is also, of course, very subjective. So my big piece of advice for anyone who wants to break into comedy is to actually study it. Like, take one improv workshop, take one sketch writing workshop, because then you'll kind of understand the language that comedy showrunners are coming from. And editing and writing is very, very similar. I think most editors will experience that, like, writers and editors just we're simpatico, like it's the very similar process. But it is actually quite different, and it's very microscopic editing. It's hard. One of my friends I just saw recently, I reconnected with her from our old days in the documentary program at USC. She's had a great year. Monique Zawitowski. She cut both Will and Harper, which was the Will Ferrell documentary where he went on a road trip across the country with his friend Harper, who was a writer and producer from SNL and is now a trans woman. And it's very funny. It's very moving. She also cut the Oscar-winning short doc this year, The Only Girl in the Orchestra. And so I really quickly asked her, I was like, how was cutting, especially Will and Harper, for you? Because I'm like, I know comedy's hard. She's like, it was so different. She was like, it was so comedy is so hard. And it was kind of exciting to hear that was just, an experience that was very vivid for her. Because I'm like, it's my experience as well, that it's a different kettle of fish. So when I first jumped into Half Hour, it was on a John Stamos show called Grandfathered. And the other editor was named Stuart Bass, and he's a longtime Half Hour editor. He'd been on The Office for a little bit. He'd been on Don't Trust the Bee in Apartment C or something, and I'm forgetting. Eventually, he wound up one of his last credits was the Series of Unfortunate Incidents, which was so great. So he really was he'd been doing it for a long time, and I learned a lot from him, and that was really helpful. And then the other editor editing with next door to us was Dave Bertman, and he eventually went and did the pilot for This Is Us, cut the pilot for This Is Us. The show we were on, Grandfathered, was also exec produced by Dan Fogelman, who did This Is Us. And the post team really wound up loving me and my work ethic and my ability with music because of, I think, those things that they thought they should be worried about, like, can she do comedy? I'm like, right, I got to work on my comedy skills, but I'm bringing all these other skills in here now. And so they just were like, are there more editors like you? And I was like, oh my God, I'm just throwing the rope over the wall to Shondaland. I'm like, come on out, you guys. Like, like there's people love us, like we have a really hard work ethic, and we really, and we put music forefront. And so I referred a bunch of editors to them on This Is Us for their first season. I was already booked on a Katherine Heigl legal drama with some writers I knew from Grey's Anatomy, which only went one season, and This Is Us went like 8 or whatever. Like, oops, I picked the wrong show. But eventually they brought me over. And so in the meantime, that I just was doing this back and forth. I would do a half hour, and then I would, get the call and do a 1 hour. And I actually really like liked kind of pinballing. But there was this moment, I filled in for an editor who was on maternity leave on This Is Us. And then the next job after that was a job called Lodge 49, which is the most magical, wonderful show I've ever worked on. And it's very little scene. Wyatt Russell was the lead, and he is, now a Marvel superhero. But it was also for AMC, and it was my first experience on a show where we didn't have to worry too much about the TRT, the total running time. And it was just, again, part of the magical experience. We just made each episode the best it could be. And it made me realize how much of my work for the past 18 years had been about just getting the show to time. Here, I've cut your beautiful script, but now all my time spent with these brilliant showrunners and writers was about what can we take out instead of what can we make better. And so Lodge 49 was just the opposite experience. It was just poetic, and the episodes were wonderful. And then I went back to This Is Us, and This Is Us had become a juggernaut in that period and had really leaned into the tearjerkerness, but it had started out like pretty comedic. And so, but we were having those issues of like really long editor's cuts, having to pull out full beautiful scenes with Mandy Moore and Milo Ventimiglia, and I was like, no. And I just realized I was like, I don't want to work like I've done that. And I think that was one thing that appealed to me about comedy, is that comedy showrunners are not precious, and they want a tight script. They want fast timing. If the joke didn't work, they're like, cut it. It's just delightful. You're not going through this agonizing process of like shaving frames and figuring out how to, get characters across the room because you need to cut off the middle of the scene or something. It's great. It's so dialogue driven. And so I just was like, oh, I left Grey's so that I could do half-hour comedy. And here I am on an amazing show, This Is Us, that is incredible, and incredible artists. And all my friends were the editors there. But I was just like, I need to remember what I was trying to do, because This Is Us was not a far leap from Grey's Anatomy. So I think I felt like I've already made my mark in that genre. And I had an assistant editor at that point who was amazing. And she and I had gotten to co-edit one This Is Us episode together. And she did an incredible job. And I was like, well, she's definitely ready to jump in here. So I got the call saying, are you free to do Space Force? And, you just hear that pitch. It's like, John Malkovich, Steve Carell, Space Force. I was like, and Netflix, too. I was just like, yes to all of that. And so it was a very scary moment to like walk in and give notice that This Is Us. But I felt okay about it because they knew me very well. And Dan Fogelman was a comedy guy. And so I was like, I have this chance at, he'd actually made a movie with Steve Carell. And so I was like, it's so hard to say no to that. And I was like, Anne Lyson, my assistant, is just here and ready and hungry to do an amazing job for you guys. So that was probably the scariest moment in my career, was doing that. And then Space Force was, when we talk about timing, it was a show I wished was a lot tighter, to be honest with you, in the end. I think that Greg Daniels, the showrunner, they wrote amazing, funny scripts. And then I think he was really scarred by the time on The Office, where they were having to just compress everything and cut everything out. That's why he's doing all these super cuts now of all those episodes, because there was so much stuff they had to cut out. And because I think that had been very scarring, he was like, oh, I get to make a show and make it as long as I want it to be, and I don't have to cut anything out. So, but I think that sometimes, shows obviously they benefit from that squeeze. They get tight and fast and energetic, and so I think it lost a little bit of the energy by allowing some air to come in. I mean, but again, it was a great experience for me in comedy, and like reading these brilliant scripts and working with these brilliant actors and getting to do fun things with songs and stuff. So
I have to ask you about, so letting air into the show, you're there saying, this could be tighter. This could be, what's your reaction to that as watching this, saying like, no, this feels really good. I love this work style. We're not pressured to keep it at like, dead on this timing. But as an editor, were you able to look at it in real time, or are you getting caught up in the show itself, saying like this is good, and then the audience reaction, or like where'd you fall on that?
Well, eventually we're making the show that the showrunner wants. That's I that lesson was ingrained in me on Grey's Anatomy with Shonda, because Shonda Rhimes, the original the first season on Grey's Anatomy was really contentious with the network, and they just were fighting her so much. And eventually she's like, they want to cancel this show, so I'm just gonna make the show I want to make, and because this is all I'm gonna get, you know. And so cut to following your instincts leads to a 20 season run, you know. So I think she learned this really strong lesson, and I just learned to trust her instincts. And so on the mix stage, like literally my guiding mantra was, is this what Shonda wants? Like, she's the only audience member I care about. And so I kind of have brought that to most of the other shows I've been on. Like, what is the show the showrunner wants? You know, I'm here to collaborate, but in the end, I'm here to deliver what they want. Yeah, Greg I think he really wanted to see what it felt like to let things just kind of live in the moment a little bit more. You know, I had one episode that was this one with the chimp, and it was kind of written like an action movie. And I had so much fun, like cutting it like an action bottle episode. And so that was a big, like, kind of, you know, stop sign for me, because he was like, no, 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 no. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So, you know, you just learn that sometimes you do have a different take, and he's brilliant, and he's done so many shows that I've loved. Like Parks and Rec, and you know, I just realized, okay, I'm making his show. I'll speak up when I can. Like, there was one song we put into an episode that I just loved it, and then we had a big conflict on the mix stage about how it should be mixed, and you know, I have to defer to what he wants in the end, but we still talk about that.
Yeah.
the assistant editors from that are like, you know, we loved that you put that song in, and it was, you know, it was just this, you know, you don't forget those moments, and you don't win every battle. So, but actually Greg wanted to work with me again on Upload, and I was going to do that. And then Hacks came up, I think. So I jumped to the Mike Schur camp, basically.
Right. They do, to your point though, that, you know, many editors will say you have to be prepared to lose 100% of the battles you wage. It doesn't matter. You're serving a greater thing, right? Like you should be opinionated, but not so rigid that you're not prepared to try anything, right? Even if it's not the thing you think it should be. So
exactly.
It's a tough job though. It's like, I know editors are also just like, I was right, they were wrong.
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it's one reason why way back on Grey's Anatomy, we all as editors like campaigned to go to the tone meetings, and tone meetings don't always happen as much anymore. A tone meeting is done before shooting begins, and it's like the director and the writer of the script sit down and go through page by page and talk about the subtext of each scene. And that is often where the most notes come for an editor, is because the subtext isn't quite right. And that's what writers are sort of responding to. And sometimes that can be fixed just with score. Sometimes that can be fixed actually in a different scene. If you like underline the tension in an earlier scene, the subtext is stronger in a later scene. And so that's one of the biggest skills you need to develop as an editor, is to be able to read the subtext. And if you're ever confused about it, I mean, I would just pick up the phone and call the writer. Like sometimes on Grey's, we ran out of time to have tone meetings a lot. And, but I would also bring my assistant editors to those tone meetings, because my assistant editors would always help me with the temp scoring. And that is where you're basically just like, you know, pointing a light at the subtext for the audience. And so I'm like, it's important for you guys to know what we're trying to achieve here too. And so, yeah. And so when there's not a tone meeting, and there's not a lot of them in comedy, I think it's tough, because it's like you're sort of trying to guess what the writer wanted, and then the director's interpretation, and then your interpretation. And so that is why, like, the editor's cut is not usually what goes on the air, because you've got to just keep shaping it in the direction that is desired. And there's a lot of shows where I preferred my editor's cut, but you know, they didn't buy my editor's cut. You know,
why do you think there's not as many like tone? You said they're not they're not doing the tone meetings? Why has that changed or evolved?
I mean, time, I think, is a huge one. I'm about to start another drama. I've actually done a right turn back to drama after like a really great solid comedy run. And one of the reasons why, oh my gosh, one of the reasons why is just because I actually missed working with score, like really beautiful score. And in my interview with the showrunner Karen Campbell, it's a show called MIA that will be on Peacock. And it's actually the director of the pilot is Alethea Jones, who was my favorite director on that show, Lodge 49 from 2018. And it's our first time getting to work together again. And we've been trying for years and years. And so I just love that, like, this person I loved and adored working with and thought was brilliant. I just stayed in touch with her and would just, cheer for her other projects. And now here I am getting to work with her again. But I in my interview with them, we talked about the tone meetings because I was just like, to me, it's just so important. And if you can't go to the tone meeting, so go to the production meeting. I think what happens, and I know this happened on Abbott Elementary, that things are so compressed, especially in comedy, like they're just, one episode is shooting on top of the other. And so when they do a tone meeting, if they do it, it often winds up being almost more of like a production meeting where you're talking about technical issues and how you're going to shoot the scene, not why you're going to shoot the scene. That's what tone meetings should be. It's like, why is this scene important? What do we need the audience to get from this? And I think a lot of people found that the tone meetings would turn into like just these production meetings where they talk about like, it's going to be a big, beautiful wide shot. And then they felt like, well, this is just a repeated meeting. We don't need to do this meeting. And so I think there's not as many tone meetings because both schedule crunches and the fact that like you lose your way sometimes in the like the going down the barrel to the start of production. I think they just forget that you have to take this beat for a second and just think about the script. And the tone meeting is about, to me, the space between the lines of dialogue, like, and so I love that. And I've missed that a little bit. Hacks is like razor sharp, such intelligent dialogue. And it was just honestly the best writing I've ever experienced. But it's also, it's a high pressure show to work on also because they shoot in a pretty compressed schedule and the expectations on that show are even higher than ever now. So I did one episode of this season that's about to start. So it was awesome to come back for a second, but that season one I really cherished because it was a special time before anyone knew it was going to be anything, and it was called it was like FKA Hacks, formerly known as Hacks, And the studio didn't want to give them that name, but I'm so glad they fought it and they got it just like Shonda did. So
Susan, speaking of backs, you had said this before. We're out of time. We have to have you back. We have to have you back.
I know. I always have a lot
I know
to say.
that just flew by the way. And usually we allocate like 20, 25 minutes and like we blinked and 40. So, I mean, it's great. But I do love, it just seems like you've had this, you've jumped on things that like got some gathered momentum and turned into these like longer term experiences. It's really, I don't think it's an accident, but I think it's really amazing. And it's like, a lot of people just, if they get one of those, they feel really lucky. But it's amazing. I got to watch the Lodge 49 too, by the way.
It's so poetic. I think the New York Times said it's either the most tragic comedy or the most comedic tragedy on TV. It's impossible to describe, which is probably why it was like hard sell. But it just was referenced again in another New York Times review that was for that animated show Common Ground or something. I think that's supposed to be really great. And they said, oh, this reminds us of they said the perfect Lodge 49. And I'm like, it's the best. I don't know how to describe it. I get chills when I think about that show. It was magical. But really quick last pitch just for your students and everything.
Go. This is what we want.
Okay, when we were talking about how hard it is to get into comedy, I just wanted to mention that, after the Me Too movement, there was incredible just doors opening for so many women in the industry, and especially in parts of the industry that had been a little more closed off. And comedy was one of them. And an editor named Jamie Nelson sent an email to like 20 female comedy editors that was subject line was calling all female comedy editors. And she's like, I just want to have your names in one place because everyone's calling me, because she was working on Blackish at the time. And they were like, we can't find any female comedy editors. And she was just like, oh, I want a group email. I can just send these job leads to you. So I and some of the other women on that list just started amplifying that. And I was throwing a lot of like pilots I couldn't do back to that. I got an inquiry from What We Do in the Shadows. My friend, and I was like, you guys, I can't do this show, which I love. Somebody should take this job, jump in there. And the woman who did just won the Eddie for it, Liza Cardinale. And so it was really effective. We were really seeing like we were getting each other, helping each other get really good jobs on like good level shows and just building, fighting that stigma that women don't know comedy or whatever. And it wound up growing to about 70 or 75 women. And then we moved it to Slack and we opened it up to assistant editors, all genres, features, documentaries, post producers, music editors. We now have 834 members, and now it's just called Calling All Female Editors. We call it the Cafe, and it's an incredibly supportive space. The job industry has dried up a lot. So it was a very rich space for finding jobs. Now it's a rich space for finding support, and just mentorship. And it's wide open. And so if people can find me and send me an email, I can invite young women editors who are up and coming or established, into it. So it's a really great space to be able to connect with your female editing idols.
So there's no way,
Right.
there's no way you're going to be able to answer the one takeaway because you had about
You have 1,000 takeaways.
Right. 12 to 1,000 takeaways. So I'm not going to ask what everyone's takeaway is unless you want to answer. If there's one, there are just so many things. I don't know how you could give us one takeaway, Susan, one takeaway, Josh, one takeaway, Jason, and then let's wrap things up with what's going on.
Okay. Just one of the special things was my professor of documentary at USC, Kate Amond, who helped me get those first jobs on documentaries right after school. She is still in my life. And it's kind of amazing because I would go to the Eddies every year. One of the other editors at Grey's Anatomy was like, we're all going. She was a member of ACE, Brianna London. And she would introduce me as the baby editor, like to all these fabulous editors that she knew. And we'd always sit at this table with like this one guy, his name was John Rafua. And he was always very cagey about what project he was working on. And eventually it was Avatar. He just couldn't say it. I was like, I've been sitting with you for the last like 3 years, and this is the movie that you were working on. Wow. But every year I would go to the Eddies and I'd see Kate Amond, my professor from USC. And I just remember one time she was like, you're doing so great. And it meant so much to me to see this professor that had helped just, support me along the way and also just been an example. She had a beautiful home, a beautiful cutting room, next to a swimming pool. And it was like, she showed us an example of a life you could have, as a female editor in whichever part of the world of filmmaking you went to. And so it's just very inspiring. And she was such a lovely person who stayed connected to so many students. So every year at the Eddies, I would see her again and again. And it just always was this joyful moment. And then a few years ago, I was elected to the board of ACE, and she was on the board of ACE. And it was just really amazing to like get into ACE and then to be serving on the board with the person who was like my first teacher in editing. And I just, it's very special. And so I see her every year, and seeing her it's almost like my little thermometer check-in on like, okay, I'm still doing good. I'm still doing good. And she's still doing amazing. She does a lot of documentaries for Sundance. And I think she was an advising editor on that Only Girl in the Orchestra movie. And I think she's about to direct a documentary. And so anyway, it's good. It's good to stay in touch with those people that inspire you.
I keep saying it after we've done a lot of these. Everyone's story is different. It's amazing. Like there's no formula to getting into this industry and having a really satisfying, career in it and productive one. And there's a word that I'm not, long COVID. I just can't think of words anymore. Gratifying career. It's too many syllables. It's amazing to hear your story. And will inspire many people. And if you're asking to pass around the information for Cafe, there are some editors in our 6-week class right now. There's 3 women who would I'm sure love to. I mean, I don't know if they have to be members of the Guild or ACE or any of that stuff. No,
Not at
okay,
all.
great.
And actually, we have members in New York, London, Austin, Nashville. It's really been a remarkable thing. It's totally free. It's not an organization. It's just it's a Slack channel, and it's magical.
That's
and
great.
I'll email you guys the link.
Terrific. Thank you so much. I do want to know, well, Jason, your takeaway, and then I have one question.
Oh, well, mine's not going to be serious because I don't usually do that. Everybody always says something much more takeaway. Mine is Josh managed to get another big throwback TV show into the last time we had someone on here. He did The Love Boat. He got Julie McCoy. Now it's Mork and Mindy. So that happened. And thankfully, you didn't go on to do Big Red commercials, and you went into editing because I think what you're doing, we didn't even get to talk about. You do stuff with ACE educational stuff, and like we didn't even do any of that. So
part 2, we will discuss ACE education.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking that also. Like, we just talked a lot about my past, and like the future for me is I'm very interested in just the legacy of editing and editors and the craft, and also supporting mental health of editors. It's just tough. And so I actually am going to speak at a symposium that's here in LA that'll be on the history of women in film. So I'm going to talk about the sort of the myths and truths of female editors in the golden age of Hollywood. And then I've been very passionate about like doing some interviews. I just found out the editor of Breaking Away, that great movie, Cynthia is a woman, Cynthia Scheider, and I'm trying to locate her so I can interview her. I love doing panels. I did a bunch of panels last year that I moderated, and I honestly find that even a little more gratifying than cutting right now. Just like it's like I've built my body of work, and now I want to talk about it and share it with people. So my takeaway that I wanted to say is, just be in touch with what you want and what you're looking for, and to write it down and tell people, and just state your goals. And you can't win the lottery if you don't buy a ticket. You can say you want to buy a ticket, but you still won't win the lottery. So I just really recommend people do that. Like, write those goals down, say them out loud, say them to the people you meet.
Excellent. Thank you. Jason, what's going on at Manhattan Edit Workshop?
We have some events coming up. There'll be a documentary event with editors for that, and also a color for some commercials. So check out those events on Sites on a Story.
Fantastic. Susan Vaill, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, like Josh said, 40 minutes, 50 minutes just went by like that. We have to have you on another time so you can talk about the things that you wanted to talk about.
Yeah. The education stuff. I've been doing workshops and Edit Fest, and I'm like, I love doing that. It's really fun. So
okay. On behalf of Manhattan Edit Workshop, I'm Rafi Salem. Thank you, Josh Apter. Thank you, Jason Benke. And thank you again, Susan Vaill. It's been fantastic, and we'll see you all next time. Please like, subscribe, right, Jason? Subscribe, comment, follow.
There'll be a thing on screen that's like ding ding, right? You got a little subscribe guy.
Do all that
stuff. Thank you.
Visit us at mewshop.com.